Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. This is voting day in Alberta. Millions of Albertans head to the polls to elect their new municipal governments. Premier Jason Kenney speaks out about the importance of sending Ottawa a message this election when it comes to equalization payments. And the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is launching a new lawsuit against the Ontario government over vaccine passports. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. It was election day in Alberta as millions of Albertans went to the polls to vote for their new municipal governments. In our city, there were 81,000 eligible voters. We have some unofficial results for you. In Lethbridge, Blaine Higgin is the new mayor. Higgin, a recent city councillor, captured around 43% of the vote. Two-time former city councillor Bridget Mearns finished second, capturing around 41% of the vote. Stephen Mogden, a lawyer here in the city, was a distant third with around 9% of the vote. Again, these are all unofficial numbers. The official numbers will be made known on Friday. As for Lethbridge City Councillors, here are your unofficial winners. Current councillors Belinda Croson, Jeff Carlson were re-elected. Newcomer Jen Schmidt-Rempel was elected. Former Police Chief John Middleton Hope is now a Lethbridge City Councillor. Mark Campbell, Nick Palladino, Rajko Dodic, and Ryan Perker all elected to Lethbridge City Council. As for the office of trustee for the Lethbridge School Division, your winners include Allison Purcell, Andrea Chuck, Christine Light, Craig H. Whitehead, Jenny Steed, Christina Larkin, and Tyler Demers. For the office of trustee and the Holy Spirit Catholic School Division Ward 2, the winners were Bob Spitzig, Carmen P. Momberket, Linda Ellefson, Roisin Gibb, and Tricia Doherty. Now, there were a couple of questions that residents of Lethbridge were asked to vote on. One was if we should have a ward system. Well, 56% of you said yes. The second question on the ballot was if Lethbridge should have a third bridge, and 60% of you also said yes. There were a couple of Alberta referendum questions on the ballot. One was if we should reform equalization. Well, 59% of you said yes. The other was on daylight saving time and if we should adopt it year-round. So stay on daylight savings, and 51% of you said yes. For the Alberta Senate election, these are the three you voted for, and they're all Conservative candidates: Pam Davidson, Erica Barutz, and Mikhailo Martiniuk. Now in Medicine Hat, the leader for mayor at our broadcast deadline is Lindsay Clark with close to 3 times more votes than the incumbent Ted Clugston. In Calgary, the winner in a landslide was Jyoti Gondek with 45% of the vote. In Red Deer, the winner was Ken Johnston with 57% of the vote. In Edmonton, former Liberal MP Amarjeet Sohi with 45% of the vote. Premier Jason Kenney says today's referendum on the federal equalization program was about whether or not Alberta should push hard to get a fair deal. The question for voters today on the ballot included whether the section of the Constitution that enshrines the principle of equalization payments should be removed.
What I think most Albertans object to is the expectation from Ottawa and other provinces that we should be generating $20 billion a year more in taxes for Ottawa than we get back in benefits and transfers, while other governments, including the federal government, are constantly hammering our Alberta economy, our largest industry, our energy industry, with the cancellation of pipelines, with the No More Pipelines law, with the tanker ban, with so much else. And so this is an opportunity to say, we want you to take us seriously. We're asking for negotiations on a constitutional amendment to advance, first of all, equalization reform, but also reform of other programs like the so-called fiscal stabilization program.
Lethbridge emergency crews were called out to a CP rail bridge on Mayor McGrath earlier today. Police say a semi-truck collided with the bridge as it traveled underneath. Fortunately, there were no injuries, but Mayor McGrath at the CP rail bridge and under Highway 3 was closed for quite some time as crews cleaned up the mess. An investigation into the collision continues. A rally for accessible YQL transit took place outside of City Hall on Saturday. Concerned residents gathered to discuss their issues with Lethbridge Transit's CityLink network. Organizer Jess Tallstrup says the transit has become less accessible since commute times have increased with the revamp of the service.
In terms of the stops, many of them being eliminated and it being quite a walk for a lot of people, 15 to 20 minutes. As well, with the service cutoffs in certain areas, people are being left stranded, unable to either get to work or home from work. And then, you have a person that is working a minimum wage job that's having to pay, $20 for a taxi to work, and that's just not feasible.
So I think what really needs to happen is an immediate reinstatement of the cut of $350,000, because that budget cut has impacted Transit's operations ability to do well. We also need to be looking at a system that's going to work for folks. What does that mean in terms of funding? What does that mean in terms of access? But also actually speaking to transit users to figure out what's not working, what wasn't working before CityLink came in August, and then how we move forward from here.
A letter was available for residents to leave comments and concerns they have with the service, and the letter will be submitted to Lethbridge Council. During difficult times like these, it's very important to receive as much support as possible. Penny Pittman is a family support worker for the Family and Community Support Services in the Warner, Milk River, and Coots areas. Pittman explains the impacts groups like hers have had in so many of our communities.
These are groups that include anyone who cares for children in any capacity. So grandparents, guardians, foster families, step families, biological parents. And it's just a safe space for them to get together and talk about, sort of the joys and the challenges of caring for children.
Watch the Q&A with Penny Pittman from Family and Community Support Services coming up later in our broadcast. Lethbridge residents and many people from across Alberta and British Columbia are set to receive a nice little chunk of change if they qualify for a sweet new grant. The Tell Us Story High Voices initiative supports content creators like filmmakers and vloggers who are looking to find some extra funding to create their own locally reflective episodic project. $10,000 will be awarded to those who are eligible. You can submit a wide variety of ideas for the project.
If you want to do reviews, say on movies or makeup tutorials, or like you talked about, it could be cooking shows, trivia shows, talk shows. It can be about cities. It can be about, say, a local landmark or a local store, something that's really well known in your community that you want to expand on and create a program about.
Applications for the grant will be accepted until October the 26th. Operation Red Nose will not be held in Alberta, Saskatchewan, or Manitoba this year. And the reason? High COVID-19 cases. Operation Red Nose is a nonprofit group that promotes responsible behavior to prevent impaired driving by providing a volunteer chauffeur service during the Christmas holidays. Marie Chantel Fortin with Operation Red Nose says each community was able to give feedback as to whether they should offer the safe, free rides or not, with a large majority wanting to wait one more year.
We gave the opportunity for our local host organizations to decide for themselves whether they felt they would be able to actually provide the safe ride service or not. And that decision was a local decision in every community. And most of them, well, in Alberta, the host organizations decided that at this time it was not a good idea to go ahead. They were all, pretty much excited to go forward, move forward in the summer when we talked to them in July. But when we talked to them again at the end of August, early September, the situation had changed and they felt that it would be better to wait for one more year.
Operation Red Nose says the safety of its volunteers and clients is its top priority. Alberta's opposition NDP is urging the Kenney government to require that all MLAs, staff and visitors to the legislature show their vaccine passports. The New Democrats say it must be done to protect Alberta families and businesses. The request was made at the Member Services Committee earlier today. Thousands of frontline essential workers began their day with a nasal swab before they headed into hospitals, daycares, and schools across Manitoba. Public health orders now require rapid COVID-19 testing or vaccination. The change will affect around 10,000 healthcare workers who, as of Friday, had not disclosed their immunization status. The province's more than 1.3 million rapid tests have been sent to more than 600 workplaces. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms has filed a constitutional challenge against the province of Ontario over its vaccine passport mandate. The legal challenge has been brought forth on behalf of 8 Ontarians who say their charter rights and freedoms are being infringed upon by being forced to take 1 or more doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. Joining me now to discuss this in more detail is one of the lawyers handling the case from the Justice Centre, Jorge Pineda. And he joins me now from Hamilton, Ontario. Jorge, what are your clients' biggest concerns with taking the COVID-19 vaccine?
we do have one client who was vaccinated and suffered serious side effects. She took the first dose, was hospitalized afterwards, but has been unable to get an exemption. Her concern is, of course, avoiding having to go through that again or something worse. She's unable to get an exemption, so she's still being coerced into taking the second dose. But that mirrors the concerns of our other clients, which is frankly that there aren't long-term, we still don't have long-term tests on the effects of the vaccines.
Now, the Ford government is taking vaccination quite seriously, saying that business owners who do not enforce these new restrictions could face fines up to $10,000 or even jail time.
They can face fines, thousands, even more, if they are in contempt of the vaccine passport. There is jail time up to a year in jail if these vaccine passports are not enforced by owners. And it is really part of the malicious aspect of the vaccine passports is that it recruits individual citizens to enforce these laws that would typically be contrary to human rights code against their patrons and their clients. And so one of our clients is a gym owner who thinks that discriminating against his clients, his patrons, based on their vaccination status is immoral, wrong, and he simply won't do it, and he's willing to face the consequences.
Jorge, explain how you're really building your case and when you're going to court.
The court dates have not yet been set, although the claim has been filed and served. But really what we're relying on is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is there to guarantee the fundamental rights of Canadians. And this includes the right to your own bodily integrity, your own bodily autonomy. And so we are going to be asking the court to find that the vaccine passport is really as a tool to coerce individuals into submitting to a medical intervention that they've decided for whatever reason that they do not want to submit to. And so our case is built on a few sections of the Charter, but fundamentally we're focusing on the right to liberty and the security of the person.
Thanks so much for your time today, Jorge. We'll keep an eye on this story as it develops. That was Jorge Pineda, lawyer for the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from Hamilton, Ontario. NDP MP Charlie Angus says Ottawa needs to look at how it plans to hold Facebook and other tech giants accountable. He says the government needs a new independent ombudsman who understands how the companies are using algorithms in a way that is detrimental to democracy and society as a whole.
Ms. Hugan reveals that Facebook knew that its algorithms are driving hate content and leading to breakdown in civic engagement. That Facebook made the decision to incentivize profits through its use of its algorithms over the well-being of its users. And this has resulted, according to Ms. Hugan, in this exploitation of the algorithms is now posing fundamental threats to democratic life. Unfortunately, Mr. Trudeau and the government ignored much of the key elements, and they continue to mishandle the tech file. But because of the decision of Justin Trudeau to call an early election, he has the opportunity now to set things right. It's all about the algorithms. That's where we need to focus, because the massive use of algorithms and AI and their deliberate misuse by Facebook must be addressed.
Former U.S. President Bill Clinton was released Sunday from a hospital in Southern California where he'd been treated for the past 6 days with an infection. Health officials say the 75-year-old's fever and white blood cell counts have normalized, and he will head home to New York to continue his recovery. Clinton was admitted to hospital last Tuesday with an infection unrelated to COVID-19. Hillary Clinton has been with her husband at the hospital and was accompanied there over the weekend by her daughter Chelsea. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken paid tribute to his predecessor, Colin Powell, the U.S.'s first black Secretary of State who died from COVID-19 complications. Powell was 84.
He came to the State Department after a long and extraordinary career in the U.S. Armed Forces. He was General Powell, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, when he walked into the Oval Office to be sworn in as our nation's top diplomat. After that, he was Mr. Secretary. He gave the State Department the very best of his leadership, his experience, his patriotism. He gave us his decency, and the State Department loved him for it. Secretary Powell was, simply and completely, a leader, and he knew how to build a strong and united team.
Heavy rain in central and northeastern Thailand caused major new flooding on Monday. Authorities were forced to release water into an already swollen river after a reservoir reached full capacity and other reservoirs and dams facing the same possibility. Flood warnings are in effect for communities along the Ta Chin River. More than 38,000 homes in the province have already been affected by massive flooding so far. It was on this day that inventor Thomas Edison died at the age of 84. 2 American athletes were suspended for their part in the Mexico City Olympics protest, and singer-musician Chuck Berry was born. This is Today in History for October the 18th.
October 18th, 1931.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
Inventor Thomas Edison dies in West Orange, New Jersey at age 84. Among his many inventions, the electric light bulb, the phonograph, and the motion picture camera. 1962. 3 scientists are named winners of the Nobel Prize for Medicine for their work in determining the double helix structure of DNA. Dr. James Watson of the United States and Drs. Francis Crick and Maurice Wilkins of Britain share the Nobel honor. 2001. CBS News announces an employee in anchor Dan Rather's office in New York has tested positive for anthrax. It's part of the anthrax scare that kills 5 other people and shakes Americans following the September 11th attacks. Also in New York that same year, 4 disciples of al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden are sentenced to life without parole for their roles in the deadly 1998 bombings of 2 U.S. embassies in East Africa. 1968. 2 American athletes are suspended for a high-profile protest at the Mexico City Olympics. Sprinters Tommy Smith and John Carlos give Black Power salutes during a medal ceremony. The athletes are later banned from all Olympic competition for life. And 1926. Rock and roll performer Chuck Berry is born in St. Louis, Missouri. Today in History, October 18th, Tim McGuire, The Associated Press.
Growing up today can be a real challenge. Throw in a COVID-19 pandemic, and there are even more obstacles for young people to overcome. Josh Burnett wrote a book called Adulting 101 Book 2. He's a guy who owned a restaurant and worked with many millennials. Josh says there's a perception when it comes to millennials and their attitudes. He says a lot of it has to do with the instant world we live in today.
I think this generation has just grown up in the age of instant. Everything I want or need, I can access very quickly. And if it's not immediate, then I'll just move on to the next thing. And whether this is food or Amazon Prime or even relationships, we see this, there's not much of a desire to build that resilience, to really build that grit out, to do more, to do better, to stay in a relationship with somebody. Because in my pocket, I can pull out my phone and be connected with billions of people anywhere in the world at any time.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Josh Burnett and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. A gorgeous fall week is shaping up with not a lot of moisture here in the forecast. Full weather details coming up for you shortly. It was a cooler day here in southwestern Alberta today. We've also going to be experiencing some of that legendary Lethbridge wind should be blowing in this evening. Jeanette Rocher is here with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it's the time of year we may begin seeing some of the frost develop overnight as well.
Yeah, that's true. And the odd time we even have to scrape our windshields in the morning too, which is not fun. And speaking of which, overnight low this evening, -2, but that could feel like -4 with the wind chill. Yes, unfortunately, we're getting to the time of year that wind chill is present. Into tomorrow, though, we're going to be seeing the sunshine again, the fog dissipating in the morning, 12 degrees the high on a Tuesday. Into Wednesday, sunshine and 14, a lovely 17 degrees the high on Thursday and Friday, and then 16 for both Saturday and Sunday. Should be a pretty decent weekend. Not too much wind tomorrow either, only 15 kilometers per hour. So not bad at at all. 14, the average high for this time of year. We're going to be seeing days higher than that. Average low, 0. 25 was where we were at, though, in 2003. And our lowest temperature on record was in 1951. It was minus 17. 7:58 is when the sun rose this morning. That's just about 8 o'clock. Amazing there. Sunset at 6:35 p.m. So days definitely, we're seeing those days get a little bit shorter there. Over on the west coast, we're looking at fog dissipating in the morning, but mainly sunny skies. Mix of sun and cloud in Victoria, 12 degrees, 14 in sunshine in Vancouver tomorrow. 8 degrees tomorrow, the high in Edmonton, and 11 in Calgary. Both of those cities seeing a little bit more wind, 40 to 60K winds in Calgary and 20 to 40K winds in Edmonton. So windier there than in the windy city right here in Lethbridge. In Saskatoon tomorrow, we're seeing a high of 15 degrees, 15K winds. Not too bad. Regina, 8 degrees, mix of sun and cloud, and 10 degrees over in Winnipeg. With a mix of sun and cloud, they are going to be experiencing wind gusts up to close to 60 kilometers per hour. So one of the windiest places in the country tomorrow for sure. Sunshine and 20 degrees in Toronto. A beautiful day in Ottawa tomorrow as well, 16 the high under sunny skies, and 14 the high in Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud. As we look further east into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton, we're seeing a chance of showers, 11 degrees the high, 14 in Halifax, 11 in Charlottetown. Now St. John's can be expecting around 5 millimeters of rain. It should end late in the morning. High winds there too, 40 to 60K, 14 the high though. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
New data from the Bank of Canada shows consumers and businesses expect increases in the cost of living to stay hot over the next year. The bank survey says respondents expect inflation to be around 3.7% over the next year, but to slow when the pandemic ends. Almost 50% of business owners surveyed said they expect the annual inflation rate to remain above 3% over the next 2 years, due in part to supply disruptions. The survey also suggests that workers are more willing to quit their jobs in search of higher pay and better hours. Business owners, meanwhile, are willing to offer higher wages but plan to pass on the cost to consumers. The annual pace of housing starts declined last month as construction continues to slow. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says the seasonally adjusted rate was down 4.4% last month to just over 251,000 units. Leading economists say the slowdown was roughly in line with expectations, and housing starts are still above the pre-COVID trend of just above 200,000 as demand remains strong. Analysts say we could see some deceleration in the coming months now that interest rates have begun to rise. Farmers and Deere and Company suppliers are worried about what the ongoing strike at the tractor makers' factories will mean for their livelihoods. More than 10,000 Deere employees walked off the job last week at 14 factories in the United States after the union rejected a contract offer. The longer the strike continues, the greater the impact will be on the communities around the plants. Some farmers have said they're already worried about not being able to get parts should their combines break during harvest. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 57 points on the day to 20,985. The Dow was down 36 points to 35,259. The S&P 500 was up 15 points to 4486, and the Nasdaq was up 124 points on the day to 15,022. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 16 cents to 82.44 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 42 cents to 4.99 US. Gold was down 2 cents to 17.64.84 US an ounce, and silver was even at $23.19 US an ounce. Wheat is at $11.43 per bushel, barley's at $9.14, canola's at $20.86, and corn is at $10.16 per bushel. Live cattle were down 53 cents to $125.45, feeder cattle were down $1.83 to $155.75, and lean hogs were up 48 cents to $78.75. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 80.81 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the results are in from the Alberta municipal election, and in Lethbridge, Blaine Hagan is the new mayor. He takes over from former mayor Chris Spearman. Hagan, a recent city councillor, captured around 43% of the vote. Two-time former city councillor Bridget Mearns finished second, capturing around 41% of the vote. Stephen Mogden, a lawyer in the city, was a distant third with around 9% of the vote. Again, these numbers are unofficial. The official numbers will be made known on Friday. As for Lethbridge city councillors, here are your unofficial winners. Belinda Croson and Jeff Carlson, who were re-elected. Newcomer Jen Schmidt-Rempel was also elected. Former police chief John Middleton Hope is now Lethbridge City Councillor. Mark Campbell was re-elected. Nick Palladino, Rajko Dodich, and Ryan Parker was re-elected to Lethbridge City Council. Working with different age groups can sometimes pose a challenge. Coming up, we chat with a man who wrote a book about working with millennials when he owned a restaurant. We chat with Josh Burnett, author of Adulting 101 Book 2, in just a moment.
Well, we live in a crazy world these days, and it can be a real challenge for our young people as they graduate from high school or college and step out into the real world. But what does it mean to be an adult anyway? And what kind of behavior should we be exhibiting? Joining me to discuss this is Josh Burnett. He is the owner of a Chick-fil-A restaurant in Yorktown, Virginia, and he's the co-author of the book, Adulting 101, Book 2. Welcome to Bridge City News, Josh. So great to have you on today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Jeanette. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, your first book, Adulting 101, #Wisdom for Life, became an Amazon bestseller. So what's different about this second book?
Sure. So the genesis of this whole project is, as a Chick-fil-A owner-operator, I have the privilege to work with a lot of students. And I quickly discovered that there was a real need in their lives to teach some of the life skills that perhaps they may or may not have received at home, and saw a noticeable impact to the business as a result of lacking some of those skills. And so I had this opportunity to come alongside of some of these team members and teach them these skills. And over the years, realized that this was such a crucial element of what I was doing. I had a chance to be a part of their progression and maturing into an adult. I realized that there is a need for this in the workplace in general, and had the chance to write Adulting 101 with a dear friend and mentor of mine, Pete Hardesty. And so the first book that we wrote is all about what an adult does. So some of the hard skills. So it's how to buy a car, it's how to budget, how to get a job. And after the release of the first book, we were hopeful we would sell more than just a couple of copies to our mothers, and it took off. We had a chance to do all right with that. The publisher came back and asked for a second book, and we began the journey of what could this look like. And with that, we engaged those same students, and we discovered there was really a need for clarity around what healthy adulthood looks like. And so it was a lot more of the soft skills that come alongside of that, and that is what the why that a second book exists.
Oh, that's amazing. What a niche to fill. And also, being the owner of a Chick-fil-A, you are hiring those really young students, like some of them 14, 15 years old, I'm sure. Some of them
Absolutely.
probably not even quite in high school yet. So today's millennials are typically highly educated. We're talking some of the older ones maybe, but it seems that they're missing some key life skill strategies and perhaps some good character traits, kind of like what you were saying. Now, Josh, you point out that nearly a third of young people also suffer from anxiety. That's a really high number.
Yes. So I think there's a couple of things that are associated with that. There's a lot of young folks today that do struggle with anxiety, but it doesn't always have to go back to character traits that they did or did not learn. And for a lot of the young people, we are seeing the ramifications of how they were parented. So on different ends of the spectrum, you have parents that were very involved and sometimes overly involved in protecting their child. And we see the result of that as that young person adults, where they may not know how to do much, or they don't know how to fail well. And so being self-aware of that. On the other end, some of these students out of necessity grew up in homes where parents weren't as engaged or as involved. And because of that, they also are struggling to launch effectively because it wasn't modeled well. So what I'm running into is I have great-hearted young people that want to do the right thing, but really desire a model of what that healthy adulthood looks like. And that's what we hope to provide to them in book 2.
That's great. Now, what advice do you have for the 20-somethings to enable them to mature and to overcome the tendency to worry so much and worry that they're not living, so that they're not living in a state of anxiety constantly?
The first half of the book is really geared around this model of knowing yourself and then leading yourself, and then knowing others and leading others. And by being able to do those effectively, we think that you will mature into a healthy adult. This is a great launching point, a great discussion guide for people to come alongside of those students and to really use this as a resource along that journey with them. But for a lot of the students I work with, a big piece of it's self-awareness. So they have a desire to be who they want to be, and you need to accept me for me. And what I try to share with them is being self-aware is so much more than that. It's really figuring out who you are in a deeper level and showcasing that for them so that they can launch more healthily into adulthood. So a lot of that anxiety can stem from not really knowing where their value comes from and trying to find it in all of these other areas that they think will give them life.
Interesting. Now, one of the issues that you tackle in the book also is social media. And of course, that can be a huge source of anxiety for teens and young people. So many teens and millennials do spend so much time in front of a screen. So how does this affect them? And is there a way to rein in that screen time and become more inclined to do things face to face?
I think that it extends far beyond just the current generation, millennials. That everybody is addicted to their phone on some level.
Especially
And
nowadays,
it doesn't,
right? When we're
absolutely,
all working from
everything.
home. Yeah.
And school is on a screen now. And so
Exactly.
it's very easy to be so absorbed into that world where we miss that human connection. So Pete and I, again, kind of provide some high-level insight into, hey, here are some tips and tricks on how to use that screen time effectively, or how to really be able to push it away a little bit from what you're doing, whether it's there's a number of apps that can help you to turn off some of these social apps so that you're not on them scrolling mindlessly for a long period of time, and encouraging you to get outside and engage with other people. And that you can't replace that human interaction. And I think the more people hide behind a screen, the more anxious they can become. And so we try to touch on technology and screen time and social media, and even the comparisons that come as a result of that, and what that can do to somebody's mental health if all they do is look at Instagram and see the best day of somebody's life every single time they get on the app.
Exactly. And it's so unrealistic, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah. Now, I wonder, like in past generations, some of us were more likely to have maybe some personal mentors or someone more mature in life who would teach us and lead us into maturity. Would something like this be helpful for our mental health?
Always.
Yeah.
Anytime you can get somebody a little further ahead of you to engage with you and care for you and show you what's coming down the line, the better off we all will be. And so that's certainly something that we encourage, and that's a desire and hope of mine as a leader of a lot of young people, is to some degree get a chance to be that for them. But I think the more that we can really build up our inner circle, both of peers and of mentors that we want to be similar to and alike, I think the better off we all are.
Absolutely. Now, you point out that much of the younger generation has that entitlement mentality. Can you explain what that looks like and how we got there? And how do we go about changing that mindset too? That's a tough one.
I don't want to make it too broad where it's very easy to label and say, this generation's entitled. I think this generation has just grown up in the age of instant. Everything I want or need, I can access very quickly. And if it's not immediate, then I'll just move on to the next thing. And whether this is food or Amazon Prime or even relationships, we see this, there's not much of a desire to build that resilience, to really build that grit out, to do more, to do better, to stay in a relationship with somebody. Because in my pocket, I can pull out my phone and be connected with billions of people anywhere in the world at any time.
That is so true. How do we go about changing this mindset though?
I really think that due to these massive societal shifts where our networks have increased so dramatically, so despite this connection, we're seeing the loneliest generation that we've ever seen. So statistically, students today are more lonely than they've ever been, despite increased connection or communication rather. So all this communication, very little connection. And so within the book, through the loneliness chapters, we kind of talk about this friend formula. And it's not rocket science, but it's really initiating and getting out there, being real and vulnerable with the people that you're living life with, and just taking that first step. So we give some tips and tricks on how to do that and organizations to get plugged in with, but really it just takes going out there and making a personal human connection, even if it's a little awkward. This was true of my wife and I. We were newly married and we moved to a state that we had no connections to at all. And so we didn't have family around, we didn't have any friends. And it was on us to get out and engage and find a place to be known and to find friends.
There you go, huh? Just stepping out of that comfort zone. Not easy to do. Now, you write that we need to know ourselves and know others because we live in a highly sensitive culture where our words and our beliefs are scrutinized. It's so true. And it's important to be aware of the changing culture, our choice of words, and who our audience is. That's a tough one, huh?
Yes, it really is. And I see this play out in the business world a good deal. So we serve thousands of people every day and across all kinds of socioeconomic statuses, races, religions, creeds, whatever it might be. And the ability to connect on a human level with somebody is so critical as an employer and also as somebody that's serving a community. And so we have a chance to dig into that a little bit and teach self-awareness to this generation, as well as just emotional intelligence and maturity. When I look at people that have come through my restaurant and my organization into leadership, the skill that is oftentimes the biggest struggle is being able to be emotionally intelligent and to engage in a way that both parties can walk away from that time feeling better and feeling heard. And if we can help to solve that even a little bit, then this book will have done its job.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've all experienced failures, and you suggest that it's important to learn from our mistakes and that it can bring us to a place of becoming resilient. That makes sense.
Yes, I think learning how to fail well and be okay with that is such a critical aspect that oftentimes, as I alluded to earlier, is missing. And it's missing because we want it to be right, we want it to be now, and if it's not that way, we'll just move on. There was a sign that went viral a few years ago of a local Catholic boys' school out in Little Rock, and there was a sign on the front door that said, "Stop. If you are bringing your son's homework, their lunch, their equipment, whatever it might be, turn around and go home. Your son will be fine, and they will figure out how to problem solve in your absence." And I think this is just a great reminder, whether you're parenting somebody that's launching into adulthood, or if you're that person trying to launch yourself, that failures are really okay. And to encourage some of these soft failures, especially if you have a teenager in the house where they have a chance to live life and to make mistakes, but still while the stakes are low. And this fear of failure can have a tendency to drive us to some of these harder failures where we never want to make a mistake. And then when we do, it really hurts. So the earlier we can figure out how to fail and be okay with that and learn from it and move on, I think we build grit and resiliency and also a little bit of wisdom.
Yeah, so no more of that helicopter parenting. That's no good.
Yeah.
Now, you touched on this earlier with social media and screen time and building connection versus just, for surface communication. So many of us might have hundreds or even thousands of friends on social media. So any final thoughts on how to choose genuine, real life friends?
Oh, goodness. I think that the importance of friends is unparalleled in life. So you're going to go the way your friends go. And so finding people that have similar belief systems and values as you can be a very critical element in that. Do they have similar likes, similar stages of life, and finding people that you want to be more like. You don't want to be around a group that is bringing you down. So look for organizations in the community that you agree with and that you want to be a part of, and that is a great launching point. But a lot of times folks will leave high school or college where their friends were always built in to their normal daily cadence, and they'll hit that point afterwards where My friends are no longer provided for me. How do I go about finding folks that I want to work with and engage with? And outside of the workplace, you really have to be proactive in that. And I say all that, and it is so crucial also to find a diverse group of people that you can be around and learn from as well. But at the end of the day, you want your friend, your inner group, to be people that you want to be more like.
Absolutely. Great advice. Josh Burnett is the co-author of the book, Adulting 101, Book 2. Thanks so much for being with us today, Josh. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Being a parent is a challenging task for any of us, and it can get a lot tougher when you have blended families or special needs children. Joining us to discuss the support that is available to parents and caregivers is Penny Pittman. She's a family support worker with Family and Community Support. She joins us from Warner, Alberta. Welcome, Penny.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, Penny, I believe that you are overseeing something called Caregiver Cafe groups. That's in the Warner, Milk River, and Coots areas. It's a cute little name. So can you maybe give us a little snapshot of who these groups are for and what's it all about?
Sure. So we took the Parent Cafe and sort of renamed it to a Caregiver Cafe. And these are groups that include anyone who cares for children in any capacity. So grandparents, guardians, foster families, step families, biological parents. And it's just a safe space for them to get together and talk about, sort of the joys and the challenges of caring for children and teens too. So it's basically from 0 to 18 years of age.
Yeah, okay, so that's awesome. Now, are these groups meeting in person or online or a little bit of both? I know COVID probably had affected it a little bit.
Yeah, so we unfortunately had just launched our first series just before the shutdowns in March. So we moved it to an online platform, and all of my groups so far have been on Zoom, and which has its challenges, but it also offers some benefits. So parents don't have to leave the house or find childcare.
Yeah, I actually could see a strong benefit for it being done over Zoom. You might actually even get a few more people. So that's awesome. So the idea behind this is to help build and maintain strong and healthy families, right? So how would you define that? What kind of traits does a healthy and strong family usually exhibit?
So resilience is probably one of the main ones. Good connection, good relationships within the family, communication, and really importantly, understanding and accessing support when they need it.
Okay, yeah, that sounds awesome. Now, I understand that the concept of this Caregiver Cafe is based around 5 protective factors, right? So the first one being parental resilience. Can you maybe explain what this means? Does it just have something to do with overcoming the tendency to get overwhelmed and just kind of give up?
Yeah, so resiliency is kind of like bouncing back. So I think about like a ball. And in addition to the bouncing back factor, it's the ability to be able to take some kind of lesson or learning and growth from that stressful experience. So it's a combination of those two things that build resilience.
Right, and I can see how being a group setting could actually really help. You can hear other struggles and see how they've been able to overcome it too. So it sounds really interesting. So I understand the second productive factor is relationships and social connections. So can you maybe unpack that for us? What does that look like?
So that's about, building healthy relationships. So understanding what that actually means, understanding what might not be a healthy relationship. And also then teaching that to your children and the people that you're caring for. What does that look like? Modeling, boundaries and what to do when you might be in a situation that isn't healthy for you. And because it's not everyone even understands what a healthy relationship looks like. And being able to bring that out in a safe place and talk about, what you deserve as a human being, and understanding that you have worth and value, and having people around you that can help you remember that.
Yeah, definitely. I understand there's a third protective factor, which is knowledge of parenting and child development. So what kinds of parental knowledge do you try to share with the groups?
Okay. So we talk about lots about ages and stages, positive parenting strategies or times when, behavior might not be what you want it to be, how you can deal with that. Lots of stuff about brain development and, really understanding the capacity of your child at any given time.
That's interesting. So what about child development? Is this about brain development, like you said, or is it more like emotional development, or is it a little bit of combination?
So it's sort of everything. So knowing sort of what's typical. So we use a questionnaire called the Ages and Stages questionnaire if we think it's needed, to see how children, what's typical for development and what can they or can't they do. So that can encompass like motor skills, speech, social emotional intelligence, things like that. And then we talk about, the developing brain, because when a parent can understand that the child just isn't actually capable of doing something, their brain just has not developed enough, it helps that parent step back and be a little more compassionate and sort of rely on the more positive parenting practices. Yeah.
Now, it sounds like this is for caregivers of quite young children. Am I gathering that right? Or is this for any age group? And do you put them in different categories in terms of if you're a caregiver of a teen versus a 3-year-old? How does that work exactly?
Well, the interesting thing is that teens go through a brain development period that's very similar to, the 0 to 3, the toddlerhood, right? So you've probably heard the term three-nager, right? And that's kind of that
it
idea
makes sense, doesn't it?
The concept is their brains are rapidly changing. So in the adolescent period, it's not as rapid, but they're going through all kinds of things. So typically we would split them up. There is a set of cards in a box for teens, parents of teens or caregivers of teens. However, when you start talking with parents, a lot of what they're talking about, those core principles, apply, I think, to humankind, but for sure, all the way through. Yeah.
So at what age group does it cut off? We're talking teens, or can we even be talking about like young adult children as well, like into their, I guess, late teens, early 20s?
Yeah. Our mandate is 0 to 18. So we typically serve families in that age range. And we have been breaking the cafes up into, 0 to, 10, and then 12 to 18. So that's typically what we're doing right now. Yeah, just because as far as practical strategies go, those are going to look different.
Right, definitely.
Based on the age of your child, obviously.
And how many parents or caregivers are in each group, roughly?
Well, up to 10 in person, because in an hour, you really want to give everybody an opportunity to either break into smaller groups or to come together as a group and really let everyone have a chance to talk. Online, I've kind of found that 5 is a good number to allow that same sort of openness and
a little bit more
letting
manageable.
things come forth. Right?
Yeah. And plus, if it's a smaller group, some parents or caregivers might be more apt to want to share than if it's a much larger group. And oftentimes, there's certain people that are more dominant with talking, and others tend to keep back a little bit more. So yes, definitely. So as parents and caregivers, we need to become more aware of where the child is at, obviously, and to adjust our parenting styles accordingly. So what does that look like? It's easier said than done, for sure.
Right. So here's a quick example. Just when you're wanting a child who's under 3 to take turns with a toy or share, or the part of their brain, the frontal part of their brain, which doesn't fully develop until, they're like 25 years old, doesn't have the capacity really to monitor their impulse control and their emotions properly. So if you're expecting that to happen on a regular basis without any big feelings about it, then that to me would not be a realistic expectation. So that would be a place you could support a parent in. Okay, well, if this is what they're capable of, what would that look like for you? How could you have an expectation that was realistic? And not that we aren't encouraging them and modeling and showing them, because that's what's growing those skills. We're just not expecting that they're going to willingly and happily share.
Yeah. Now, when you observe those families that have that opportunity to meet together with others going through those same things that they're going through, compared to people who don't, how much difference does that make in parenting or just going through life, really?
Yeah, so I can just speak to what I see and what I hear. And what I hear is parenting, especially small children, can be isolating. And with, the world and the health situation as it's been, even more so. And that having a space to talk about things where you aren't worried about being judged it just helps draw out those things that they're already doing well. Because my job as a facilitator is to listen and help them see where they're already strong, so that we can draw on those strengths to just keep increasing their confidence, because more confident parent better. I mean, we all do better when we feel better, right? So that's what I notice. I notice an increase in confidence and sort of a little bit more compassion to themselves and more understanding of their children.
Wow, that's amazing. And what kind of feedback are you getting from parents and caregivers about this program?
So we're getting a lot of feedback about feeling connected, feeling supported, knowing where resources are, where they can be connected to those resources, not feeling judged, and meeting people. And this is one of the other really kind of fun things about Zoom is I recently had some parents, two moms connect from sort of the south end of the province and then up by, Colehurst area. And they've maintained that relationship. So it doesn't even have to be in your own community. So they've built a bond that never probably would have happened because we were able to be online. So things like that. And yeah.
I was going to ask you actually, being that you can do these online, can it reach people beyond the Warner, Coots, Milk River area? Have you opened it up, or are you kind of sticking strictly to those geographical areas?
No. So during the pandemic, FCSS has really tried to maintain a presence, and online was our only opportunity. So what's been happening is, like I said, we're getting participants. So every support worker in all of our municipalities might not be running the Caregiver Cafe, but maybe I'm running one, and participants from those other municipalities can join. So
that's good. I'm really
yeah,
glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, absolutely. And I understand too that FCSS also has Caregiver Cafe groups specifically designed for Indigenous families. So maybe explain a little bit, just really quickly, what is different with these groups? Is it more the cultural background that's included?
Well, so Jessica Goodrider Lowen is our family support worker and Indigenous liaison worker in Tabor. And her idea is to bring Indigenous families together to create that support network, so that they're aware that there are other families with their same cultural background in Tabor, and also to show up in a way that feels authentic for them. And, we're all trained, to be culturally sensitive in our programming. However, some of our staff have knowledge that can really benefit those Indigenous cultures.
That's awesome. So how would any interested parents or caregivers get signed up for this program? What do they have to do?
So go to the website. All of the information is listed there, the different areas, the different times, and all of the registration information is there. You can either go and look at the program, or you can just look for the family support worker in your municipality, and they will be able to get you hooked up with any programming that's running, even if it's not. So someone in Raymond could call the Raymond FCSS and they could direct them to me.
Great. And that's fcss.ca is the website for Family and Community Support Services. Thanks so much for your time today, Penny. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I hope to see more families.
Absolutely. Penny Pittman is a family support worker with the Family and Community Support Services. You can look them up at fcss.ca. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.